Good afternoon, and welcome to today's webinar on the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Surface Transportation Program Local and Local Bridge Project Solicitation Overview. My name is Merrill Meckler-Hickson. I'm the Section Chief for WisDOT Local Programs and Finance. With me today is Mike Lawhern, the statewide STP and Local Bridge Program Manager, along with Ben Jordan, Program Director at the University of Wisconsin's Transportation Information Center. And today we will be providing you with an overview of our newest project solicitation for the STP-Local and Local Bridge programs that will supplement our Bipartisan Infrastructure Law program cycle scheduling in federal fiscal years 2024 through 2026. Today's agenda is displayed on the screen. I will be starting with a short overview of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. Following that, STP and Local Bridge Program Manager Mike Lawhern will give an overview of both programs, along with the details on how to apply for a project in this solicitation, with some additional information being provided by Ben Jordan from the UW-TIC. I will then give some additional general tips on applying for federal grants, along with some helpful additional resources. So most folks viewing the presentation today have likely been hearing a lot of talk about the BIL over the past year. So what exactly is the bill? Signed on November 15th, 2021, with the funding just approved in March of 2022, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, or BIL, represents a historic increase in the federal funding that's available for local programs over the next 5 fiscal years. There will be significant increases in all of the local programs federally funded through the Surface Transportation Block Grant Program, including Wisconsin's Surface Transportation Program, or STP, the Local Bridge Improvement Assistance Program, the Transportation Alternatives Program, or TAP, and the Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality Program, or CMAQ, which has eligibility over in the eastern part of the state bordering Lake Michigan. We certainly have had our work cut out for us this year at WisDOT Local Programs. We are just finishing up work for the first funding year of the bill cycle, federal fiscal year 2022, and we are now shifting our focus on to the remaining years of the funding cycle. Now, even though the BIL is federally funded, I did want to talk a little bit about another factor that WisDOT really has needed to keep front of mind as we developed our response to the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law that had nothing to do with what was actually in the federal legislation. In Wisconsin, we must follow the direction of the state legislature when there is an unexpected increase in federal funding that exceeds 5%. In these circumstances, the department must submit a new federal expenditure plan to the Wisconsin Joint Committee on Finance, which then has the power to make changes to what the department proposes. This itself was a significant factor in the way that we delivered the federal fiscal year 22 BIL local program increase. The best example is a specific requirement that the Finance Committee made for the CMAQ program for FFY22 that restricted our use of the bill increase in CMAQ to right-of-way projects, a good example being a traffic signalization project, rather than allowing that funding increase to be utilized on any type of project, say a pedestrian trail or a transit vehicle purchase project. These federal plan requirements have been a significant factor that the department has had to account for when developing our response to the bill, and it necessitated that our plans remained as flexible as possible all the way through our solicitation rollouts. This will continue to impact the department's planning efforts for FFY23, as we will need to submit another federal plan to the Joint Committee on Finance very soon for 2023. Future bill funding years will be addressed with the initial WisDOT budgets that will be submitted as part of the regular biennial budget process. And with that, I would like to turn things over to statewide local program manager Mike Lawhern with an overview of the STP Local program.
Thank you, Merrill. Again, my name is Mike Lawhern, and I am the statewide local program manager for STP and the local bridge programs. So what is STP Local? Well, when applying for STP Local dollars, the first question you must ask yourselves is my project eligible for STP Local federal funding from the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law? Well, your roadway must meet the following criteria to be eligible. The Surface Transportation Program, or STP, provides federal funding which means that all STP projects are subject to federal guidelines for up to 80% of the cost of local road and bridge improvements with a 20% local match. And the program is split into an urban component, a rural component, and a new STP-Local component. The Bipartisan Infrastructure Law allows the DOT to break out a portion of the STP funding dedicated to the adjusted census-defined areas that have a population of 50,000 or lower for projects located on roadways functionally classified as a minor collector or local roads. This is the first time this type of roadway has ever been eligible for federal STP funding. The department is calling this new STP program component STP-Local. It is important to remember that only projects on roadways with these classifications in adjusted census-defined areas of less than 50,000 are eligible for STP-Local funding. STP urban and STP rural eligible roads must be a functional classification of urban collector or higher in an urban area to qualify for STP, or a major collector or higher in a rural areas. Connecting highways in Wisconsin are not eligible. These highways have their own dedicated departmental funding program. Now, we are not currently soliciting for STP urban or STP rural projects. The next solicitation for these program components will be released in the spring of 2023. Because the department is the delegated authority for these federal funds, please note that STP projects are all state lets with state oversight, and they are selected by an LRIP-style statewide discretionary committee. I wanted to put this slide up just to be clear what exactly roadway functional classification means. Basically, this classification structure is based around the role the road in question plays in serving the flow of traffic through the transportation network. Roadways are assigned one of several possible functional classifications within the hierarchy displayed here, according to the character of travel service that roadway provides. Busier roads, meaning some principal arterials, minor arterials, some county highways, along with busier roads defined as minor or rural collectors, are the only type of roadways that have been eligible for STP urban and STP rural in the past. What the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law has done is open up the STP program through a new STP-Local component for roadways classified as minor collectors and local roads, but again, only in census-defined areas with less than 50,000 population. This is a rather big deal because the vast majority of roads in the states, roughly 65%, are classified as local roads or minor collectors. If you are interested in finding out more about the road classifications in your area, the link at the bottom of the slide, which goes to the DOT's functional classification webpage, is a great place to start. And I believe folks should have a copy of this deck, so you don't have to worry about jotting this information down right now. Now we will take a few minutes to briefly look at the application process. In order to access the applications, the instructions, and other pertinent information, visit wisconsindot.gov and type BIL in the search bar. The second search result refers to the Federal Fiscal Year 2023-2026 Bipartisan Solicitation. Click on that link and you should see the web page. Be sure that you see the red text indicating the new BIL solicitations. From this page, you can access the applications, the instructions, and other pertinent information. Looking first at the Federal Fiscal Year 2024 STP-Local portion of this page, you can see a link colored in purple to a very useful map. This map identifies all the roadways that are eligible for STP-Local funding, that they are functionally classified as a minor collector or a local street, and they are outside the 18 urbanized areas, and that they are not classified as a connecting highway. So here's a screenshot of a portion of the state from the STP-Local eligibility map. You can see all the roads that are eligible for STP-Local funding by the purple and blue color. The purple roads are the STP-Local eligible rural roadways in population areas less than 5,000. The blue roads are STP-Local eligible urban roadways in urban areas with population between 5,000 and 50,000. There are 54 such urban areas in the state. The two blue urban areas shown here are New London and Wapaka. And there are roadways that are not colored because they are functionally classified as arterials or major collectors. And you can also see that there are no STP local eligible roads in the Appleton urbanized area, which encompasses an area well beyond the city of Appleton city limits. Now, there are 18 urbanized areas with populations greater than 50,000 in the state. And this map is very useful to identify the roads that are eligible for STP local funds. On the screen now is the application instructions for the STP local program. I strongly encourage you to read these instructions thoroughly. The following are some of the highlights. The Federal Fiscal Year 2024 STP local program has a 1 year of funding capped at $2 million statewide, and this is for construction projects only. We will accept only one application per sponsor, and new applications are required for every project. Previous applications cannot be rolled over into this solicitation. The design for selected projects must be 100% locally funded. The design must be completed by a qualified consultant, and the final PS&E or plan specifications and estimates will be due in August of 2024. The federal funding cap is $500,000 per project, and the applications are due March 24th, 2023. Late applications will not be considered, and construction must begin in calendar year 2025. The application instructions provide much more information on how to fill out the application, and again, it is strongly encouraged that you read the instructions thoroughly. On the screen now is the STP local application itself. The instructions will walk you through the project description, the existing facility, and the proposed improvement sections of the application. Please note that a Whistler map is required as part of the application. Detailed instructions on how to obtain a Whistler map are found in the application instructions. The most important section of the application is the project description and justification. To emphasize its importance, I will read this section aloud. Explain why the project is needed, including the scope and appropriate detail on the project's uniqueness and complexity. Describe specific deficiencies such as pavement cracking, edge raveling, surface deterioration, substandard geometrics, etc. Include up to 3 pictures to further show the deficiencies in surrounding land use. Describe in detail any known economic impacts to the surrounding land use, such as agricultural, commercial, industrial, educational, etc. Describe any known safety issues. Include and separately identify any 100% locally funded components of the project. Now, this portion of the application will be used by the selection committee to rate and rank your projects. You can use a separate single page document to describe the proposed project and justification. This brings us to the environmental checklist. If any of these 12 criteria cannot be met, it is doubtful that the design can be complete to meet the August 2024 PS&E date. Look at these environmental criteria very carefully and consider the impacts before submitting an application. And next is the construction cost estimate. Note that all applications must include a sheet documenting the calculations used to create the estimate. And remember, the federal cap is $500,000. There will be more on cost estimates later in this presentation. Now we will transition to the local bridge program. Before I get into the local bridge eligibility and application process, I'm excited to announce a new funding policy in the local bridge program. Now, starting with the previous BIL solicitation for local bridge projects, Bridges that are on non-federal aid system roadways will be funded 100% with federal dollars. These off-system bridges are on roadways that are functionally classified as local road or minor collector. The local bridge projects must be selected through the state's local entitlement system, so there is no guarantee that your off-system bridge will be selected. But we are looking forward to funding these off-system bridges with 100% federal dollars. In order for a bridge to be eligible for federal bridge fund, for local bridge funds, the following must be met. The bridge must be classified as deficient, which means that it is either structurally deficient or functionally obsolete. The Bureau of Structures determines if a bridge is deficient based on certain criteria. The bridge must have a sufficiency rating of less than 80. If the sufficiency rating is below 50, the bridge is eligible for either replacement or rehabilitation. If the sufficiency rating is between 80 and 50, the bridge is eligible for rehabilitation only. The existing bridge cannot have been reconstructed within the last 10 years, and the bridge must be locally owned on a public roadway that is not a connecting highway. The bridge must have a span greater than 20 feet, and the counties are the entitlement holder for the local bridge program. Projects are selected through the statewide rating and ranking process based on entitlement balance, and estimated cost. All local bridge projects are state-led with state oversight. Note that the bridge must appear on the eligible bridge list. The eligible bridge list is found on the WisDOT webpage where you find the application and the application instructions. Now we will look at the application process for the local bridge program. The process for the local bridge is identical to the previous local bridge solicitations. To access the application instructions, and other pertinent information such as the eligible bridge list, type BIL in the search bar on the WisDOT website. Click on the second result that refers to the Federal Fiscal Year 2023 to 2024 Bipartisan Solicitation, which will bring you to this page. Once again, be sure that you see the red text indicating the new BIL solicitations. You can see where the arrow is pointing to click on the application instructions, and the eligible bridge list. Here are the application instructions for the local bridge program. The application is identical to the previous solicitation. As with the STP-Local program, it is strongly recommended that you read the instructions thoroughly. The current solicitation covers 3 years, and both construction and design are eligible for funding. Once your application is ready to be submitted, make sure that you send it to the correct email address. There are 5 separate emails based on the region the bridge is in. Again, the deadline for submitting your application is March 24th, 2023. Here's the application, which is identical to the previous local bridge application, and it is pretty self-explanatory. Here's the environmental checklist and other miscellaneous items on the application. Which brings us to the cost estimate. Remember, both construction and design costs are eligible for federal dollars. If you have any questions as you review the STP-Local and STP and the local bridge information, please feel free to reach out to either the BIL main point of contact, Chris Brooks, or myself, the STP-Local Bridge Statewide Local Program Manager. All of our contact information is included later towards the end of this presentation. Now, I will pass the presentation over to Ben Jordan from the University of Wisconsin's Transportation Information Center. Ben, take it away.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you to WisDOT for asking TIC to participate in this webinar. These projects, even though they seem like they could be simple projects on rural roads, can really be quite complex. As an engineer, when I'm looking at a project, I'm asking all the questions you see on the screen, plus a number of additional questions beyond that. And remember that with federal funding in the project gets more complex and it increases the project requirements. So it's really best to have an engineer involved in putting together your application and putting together your cost estimate in your application. So hiring an engineering consultant is an option. If you don't choose to do that, certainly reach out to your county highway commissioner and your county highway staff to see if they're able to assist you in putting this application together. You want to have a high quality responsive application with an accurate cost estimate. And this is really difficult to do without specialized knowledge. If you do decide to put the application together yourself, remember these key considerations. You want to verify the segment length of your proposed project, check the pavement width and the shoulder widths at several locations, verify pavement condition, and revise the PACER rating if the rating that is on file in Whistler doesn't match what you're seeing out there on the road currently. Identify specific needs such as full depth patching, culvert replacement, guardrail, alignment changes, or other safety improvements. Some of those might put you out of the category that would fit well with this program, with the local program. So you need to look at those as well. Review crash data. If you have safety issues, you'd certainly want to identify those for a project. Check for utility conflicts, railroad crossings, wetlands, endangered species, historic or culturally significant sites. Those are things that would increase complexity of projects, would make it more difficult to do under this federal funding, and you're going to want to be aware of those, and those may make the project less likely to work well under this funding program. Verify the design fits in the existing right-of-way. If you needed to acquire a right-of-way, that would be additional cost, additional time, additional complexity. And again, you want to prepare a detailed cost estimate with contingency factors, and you really do want to have somebody knowledgeable preparing that cost estimate, because once you've put that cost estimate into your project application, if you exceed that cost, those additional costs are going to be 100% local costs. The Whistler system was mentioned earlier for getting inventory information and for getting your project map. The application form does have the link to Whistler on it and tells you how to go about getting a WAMS ID to access Whistler. But once you get into Whistler, you're going to find the information on your segments in the physical inventory section that will show you things like pavement width and shoulder width. Remember that most of this information was supplied by your local agency, and you do want to verify that information to make sure that it's correct. Finding the location map in Whistler isn't always intuitive. When you are on this physical inventory screen, if you click on the yellow Wisconsin outline icon on the map column, that will get you to the map, and we've tried to show that here with the red arrow. You want to look at your current roadway and identify if it's meeting minimum criteria or if it's deficient. I've shown here the town road standards and a table from Trans 204 that show roadway widths, pavement widths, and curve minimums or maximums and grade maximums as well. In order to figure out what category you're in, you really need to know the average daily traffic, the traffic count on the road. If you don't have that information, you're going to need to conduct a count, maybe check with your regional plan commission if they have done counts. Check with your county highway staff to see if it's something that they could assist with if you don't have the capability to do it. You may be able to estimate your average daily traffic by looking at WisDOT's traffic maps. You can go onto the link that's shown for the WisDOT traffic maps on this slide. And we did a little bit of a screenshot of a part of a map to show you that you can go in and you will see some counts on traffic on county roads. And you may be able to estimate from the traffic on the county road what category your local road would fall in. On this slide, we have a county road count of 460 vehicles a day. The black dot represents our local road, and we know that that's going to be less than that county road because the only access to that local road is that county road. So that local road might be 400 ADT or less, probably 200 ADT or less, and it starts to give you an idea of what that traffic count would be. I gave you percent grade formulas and conversion of degree curvature to radius because the curvature is shown in radius in the town road standards. If you don't understand those formulas, that's another indication that you really should have some engineering assistance involved. Note that one change in your roadway dimensions can have a significant impact on other elements of your road as well, and it can increase your cost, it can increase the complexity of the project. So the intent here with this little cross-section drawing is to look what happens if you were to widen a pavement or widen a shoulder. That causes a domino effect. You increase your base course, you increase your earthwork, you shift your ditch bottoms further out from the edge of the road, potentially moving some work outside of the right-of-way. Certainly, you have the potential in this case to be disturbing more ground than you would want to disturb based on the criteria in the project application. So you do need to look at these changes and think about everything that will change if you make a change in some of the dimensions. In addition to the standards that we showed on the previous page, you should also be looking at the guidelines that are referenced in the application for design, either the FDM 1115 or the 3R guidelines for the STP-Local. There are additional requirements for side slopes, clear zones, guardrail that you need to look at in that document as well. Typical items on a rural road project that would be part of your cost estimate could be asphalt pavement removal, excavation, pulverized relay, full depth patching, asphalt, some grading, culvert removal, culvert installation, guardrail, traffic signs, pavement markings, work zone traffic control, erosion control. These are all things that you would need to include in your estimate potentially if they're applicable to your project. And WisDOT gives you a cost estimating sheet that you can use to put together this detailed cost estimate. And then you're going to put in some contingency factors for other items, more minor items that would be associated with the project. This page gives you a link to some of those estimating resources that WisDOT has. The bottom link is a link to the form for the estimate that I showed you on the previous slide. Don't forget about engineering costs. With the local bridge projects, you have federal funding for engineering costs. With the STP-Local, you're going to be doing your design costs through local funding. You need to estimate what those costs are going to be, even though those are not going to be included in your cost estimate in your application. You also need to be aware of costs associated with the review of the project and the construction oversight, the construction engineering of the project. With the STP-Local, the application gives you specific percentages to include for construction oversight and review costs. For the local bridge, you may want to use some of the information that's contained in the table here to help you do your estimating of those engineering costs. You have my contact information here. Feel free to reach out to TIC. We can provide you some general guidance and refer you to other resources as you're putting an application together. Also, other folks to reach out to are WisDOT local program staff who are involved in these programs. Your county highway commissioner or county highway staff would be other folks who may be able to help you. Remember, if you're reaching out to any of the people that I just mentioned, try to do it early in the process. Don't wait till the last minute. Everyone is going to have limited capacity. We would all like to help you have successful applications, but if you wait till the last minute, you may not have the resources available to assist you. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Merrill, and he's going to give you some tips to preparing a successful application.
Now, at this point, for those of you who may be new to the WisDOT local programs application process, and maybe as a reminder for some more experienced individuals, we wanted to take a step back and just go over some generalized basic tips to create a successful local programs application. I wanted to walk really through the process for writing a good application for local programs, or really any grant, from start to finish. First, you'll need to do some legwork and preparation related to the project. The first thing to do when a grant application period announcement comes out, and this may seem obvious, but you'll want to take a thorough look at the supporting documentation that's published by the grant issuing agency, in this case, the Wisconsin Department of Transportation. This is usually the program guidelines document, but in some supplemental project solicitations, there may be additional guidance. Study the relevant documents to make sure that you are eligible to apply and to be competitive. Gauging eligibility is generally pretty cut and dry. For WisDOT programs, there is usually a defined list of eligibility criteria. You have to be a taxable authority in an eligible project area. There's a 50,000 population requirement for our STP-Local program, for example, or the bridge ratings for our local bridge program, for another example. Now, gauging competitiveness can be a bit tougher. Generally, in our WisDOT programs, looking at the selection or evaluation criteria within the application materials can tell you everything that you need to know about competitiveness. After you've looked at supporting documentation for eligibility and competitiveness, then you can start tailoring your project and your application to the specific program. You'll want to develop a clear definition of both the project scope and the project need. You can also begin to conduct stakeholder outreach. Generally, engaging the community is a good idea, especially engaging those who would be affected by the project. Request a letter of support if that's allowed in the program that you're applying for. Sometimes you can include these in the grant application itself, or pull excerpts in your application narrative to make your application more compelling. If you are requesting a letter of support, make sure that you do so early, and also remember that you can always provide your writer with an example of a past letter so that they have a better idea of what to write. Now we'll move on to actions that should be taken during the application process. You'll want to complete all sections of the application materials. An incomplete application may not be considered. For our LRIP program, for example, we give applicants the chance to add required materials if they've forgotten to include them, but some programs do not afford applications that same sort of leniency. In applications that I've reviewed, the materials that are most commonly omitted include maps of project areas, breakdowns of eligible costs, and photos of the project area. Please remember, a picture is worth 1,000 words. Don't miss the chance to include them if you're allowed to. For our WisDOT programs, a locational map is generally required with each application. And one really great way to clearly highlight project area on a map is to use a WisDOT tool called Whistler, or the Wisconsin Information System for Local Roads, which has interactive mapping functionality. This is really helpful for demonstrating the precise termini of a project in one map, which is what our WisDOT programs require. Whistler also allows local governments to access information related to local roads, such as width, surface type, pavement condition rating, etc. Another must while writing your application, review your application materials for errors. Look for common errors like word swaps or misplaced punctuation. It can also be helpful to read the grant aloud to yourself or have an outside reviewer who is unfamiliar with the project take a look at it. This is independent verification that your grant is clear to those without a lot of inside knowledge of the project. And really, that feeds into a larger point about the need to write concisely and clearly. Some of the best applications employ the less is more strategy and keep their materials concise, specific, and clear. Many of our STP programs include an application narrative section. This is your critical opportunity to include additional information about the scope and benefits of your project. Think of it as your opportunity to speak directly to the discretionary selection committee, if there is one for the program, and make sure that you write to the evaluation criteria. For STP-Local, for example, the selection committee considers economic impact, state of good repair, or regional or local significance. So highlighting a timber mill or a scenic overlook that's impacted by your project is a good idea. For the TAP program, safety is a criteria. So for that program, you'll definitely want to speak to how your project promotes safety in your application narrative. This is information that any selection committee is going to need in order to make a decision. And your writing style absolutely matters here. I hear from selection committees that the best applications really sell the project by speaking directly to the evaluation criteria and engaging the reviewer with compelling information. Successful applications make it easy for the committee to think, this is a great project. It's worthy of funding in this program. After the application is complete, it's helpful also to just read through it one more time with the evaluation criteria in mind. This is how the committee of reviewers is going to be scoring your application. So reading it like a committee member can give you a lot of insight as to whether you're hitting the marks you intended to while writing it. Finally, know the application deadline. Submit your materials by that deadline. Be sure to note the time of day that the application is due, and if possible, submit it well in advance in case you have technology issues. Also, check your attachments before you send off the final version of your application. Finally, after submitting an application, a good applicant has 3 traits. They are proactive, patient, and persistent. I recommend that you confirm receipt of application materials in case there was an error in transmission. Also, if something changes with your project, for example, if an event occurs that requires some sort of a scope change, please update the department as soon as possible. For programs that do not have a publicized award announcement date, it can be helpful to ask when project awards are likely to be announced. Additionally, in the waiting period between application and award announcement, do not start construction or design work on your project if the work is included in your pending application. Projects with WisDOT funding are not authorized to incur costs until the contract between the state and the municipality, also known as the State Municipal Agreement, or SMA, is signed by both parties. Finally, be persistent. Not all applicants are successful the first time, and these are often very competitive programs. If you aren't awarded initially, don't think of it as wasted time and effort. Your initial investment has essentially made you better positioned to be able to apply for project funding in the future. And with all of the recent historic funding opportunities that are happening, that is a great position to be in. Now I would like to share a few additional helpful resources. The department has just launched a new BIL webpage with information on the current BIL discretionary grant funding opportunities that are available outside of the local programs. The page includes information on what opportunities are available, how to apply for a discretionary grant writing resources, a link to request a letter of support from Department Secretary Craig Thompson, along with other valuable information. The short URLs are displayed on the screen. However, you can also simply type WisDOT BIL discretionary funding in your preferred search engine, and it would be the first returned result. Here is the contact information for the folks in WisDOT Central Office. My contact information is up in the upper right. Mike Lawhern is listed in the upper left. Down below, we have local program supervisor Tim Alushigan and the BIL primary point of contact, Chris Brooks. Please feel free to reach out to any of the individuals listed if you have questions about this STP and Local Bridge project solicitation. And here's a statewide map that shows the WisDOT regions and the regional local program managers. These are great individuals to reach out to with delivery questions and who can point you to the appropriate project manager for your individual project. We have Randy Kirk in the Northwest region, Michael Erickson in the Southwest region, Ben Roskowski in the North Central region, Alex Dooms in the Northeast region, and Jake Varnes in the Southeast region. And this slide gives links to some additional helpful resources that complement the links that Ben Jordan shared on an earlier slide, including the WisDOT Local Programs BIL webpage, a useful listing of common local programs acronyms, and a link to a series of departmental videos that discuss aspects of the local program project development process. Please don't rush to write any of these down. A full copy of today's presentation deck will be posted to the BIL solicitation webpage. And we have already received a number of questions related to this solicitation that I would like to provide some answers for today. First of all, can we use this BIL money for a project that only removes an existing bridge? The answer to that is no. The local bridge program does not allow for removal of a structure without replacement. Another question that we've gotten, is the DOT limiting the size of the project or limiting the dollar amount in an STP local area? And I know Mike covered this, but the answer is yes. For the Federal Fiscal Year 24 STP local project solicitation, WisDOT is looking at construction-only projects that meet the eligibility requirements with a $500,000 federal cost limit. Another question, can we submit a project for STP local if we are in a metropolitan planning organization area? And the answer is no. Please consider looking at applying through the MPO for an STP urban project instead. We will be releasing the next STP urban project solicitation in the spring of 2023. Another question, do we need to submit a Whistler map with our application? Absolutely. All project applications have to submit a Whistler map. I know both Mike and Ben covered this, but for more information on how to obtain a Whistler map, detailed information is included in the application forms that were covered during today's webinar. You also can go to the wisconsin.gov website and type Whistler, spelled W-I-S-L-R, in the search bar. Another question, will the DOT allow reimbursement for design costs for Federal Fiscal Year 24 for the STP local program? And the answer is no. For the STP local FFY24 project solicitation, design cost will be the responsibility of the project sponsor. Only construction projects are going to be funded with the FFY24 STP local federal funding. Another question, will the DOT allow reimbursement for design for Federal Fiscal Year 24 to 26 local bridge program projects? The answer to that is yes. Design costs are going to be eligible for local bridge projects in this solicitation. Another question that we frequently get, what is QBS? QBS is the acronym for qualification-based selection, and this is a process whereby at least 3 consultant firms are selected in order of preference based upon qualification criteria. Negotiations are initiated with the firms in their order of preference until a fair and reasonable price is secured. For more information on the QBS process, you can refer to Chapter 851 of the WisDOT Facilities Development Manual. Again, you can go to the wisconsin.gov website and type Facilities Development Manual in the search bar, and it should be the first result. A couple of other questions that are related to QBS. Do we need to follow QBS if the locals are funding 100% of the design for the Federal Fiscal Year 24 STP local projects? No, QBS is not required if there is only local funding on the design and there is no federal money on the design. And also, can the consultant fill out the local application if the locals are funding 100% of the design? The answer to that is yes. The consultant can help you with the application, again, if the design is 100% locally funded. And last question, can we purchase real estate with these FFY24 STP local projects? The answer is definitely no. WisDOT staff have determined that no right-of-way can be contemplated in this solicitation, just in order to meet the very tight August 24 PS&E deadline. So in addition to our contact information that I displayed on the earlier slide, the email address that is displayed here, dotlocalprograms@dot.wi.gov, is our main inbox for BIL related questions. Please feel free to send us a quick email if you have questions as you review the application materials. And thanks again for your time and participation in today's webinar. And please enjoy the rest of your day.